Welcome back to Homekeepers, attorney Joe Pippen. And we should have some hats and balloons and confetti. 30 years on the radio.
Yeah, 34 actually.
Really?
Yes.
Where'd they get the 30?
I'm not sure. That's close enough.
Well,
but I think it's the longest running radio show in Florida, and maybe the nation. In fact, the station manager at the radio station here in Tampa told me the only show he knew of that had been on longer than mine was the Grand Ole Opry. Now, I'm not sure that was a compliment or not.
well,
but that's...
Yes, that's, is that still on?
No, I don't know. I haven't heard it lately.
I remember
but
when I was a kid.
It probably is on a country station somewhere.
Now, so 34 years ago, was that? That was...
It was 1984.
Okay, it wasn't before talk radio, but it was right on the cusp, wasn't it?
No, the Tampa Bay Magazine did a full-page profile article on it, and in the column the editor wrote, said that I started before Rush Limbaugh did. And I did start about 3 years before he did. There's no comparison between me and Rush Limbaugh. I mean, he owns every day for 3 hours during the week, and I'm on weekends. But I'm not trying to compare myself to him. But I have been on longer than he has. So.
Whose idea was it?
Actually, it was what happened was I was writing a weekly newspaper column called Ask an Attorney. And after about a year of that, I published a little book. I organized the articles into book form and wrote a little book called Ask an Attorney. And then I dropped those by a local radio station and said, you know, here's a book for all of the hosts of the shows here. And if anybody would like to have me on as a guest, I would love to do so. There wouldn't be any fee or anything. So I got a call immediately from a brand new host looking for guests. And it just so happens that the general manager of the radio station was in the radio station that day. And he says, you know, I would like to, the phone's lit up like crazy. Everybody's wanting free advice, basically, I guess.
Absolutely.
And so the phone's lit up like crazy, and he says, I'd like to give you, now this is unheard of today because you pay for most of your time you're on, I'd like to give you a 3-hour spot on Sundays from 1 to 4. Would you be willing to take that? And I said, sure. So I started out right from the get-go. Just because I dropped some books off at a radio station and I got to be on a show, and the general manager said, we need somebody like you on our weekends. Could you come do a show? And it just went from there.
I've mentioned it before. I hope people really get it. What a wonderful opportunity this type. In fact, what we're doing right now. But also, sometimes there's a doctor on, a nutritionist.
Yes.
It's such valuable education, and if you can get through, you can talk directly to them. And I don't know what attorneys charge per hour now. I'm sure it varies on whatever the case may be. But I'll bet there's no way to calculate in 34 years how much money you've saved people just by being on the radio, and people can listen and they get an idea. Oh yeah, that applies to me. And
oh yeah, well, just the people that have done a trust as opposed to a will have saved tons of money in their estate. I mean, thousands and thousands of dollars. You know, I listened to an eye doctor on my way home from my Saturday morning show, and I just enjoy it so much.
Valuable.
I mean, you learn about the health and foods you can eat and things you can do to help your eyes, and people call in with all kind of little eye issues you never even think about. But it's just so interesting to listen to talk radio to a professional who's trying to help people by giving advice and answering people's questions.
And Dave Ramsey, for heaven's sakes, he's on over 500 stations. He's the financial guy, a Christian, and he gives people a pathway to get out of debt, stay out of debt. You don't pay any interest anymore. Get your house paid off and all that. And he said that. And then if you do it and you want to, you can go on his program and scream, we're debt free. It's a wonderful little thing they do. And he said that there have been screams on there, a total of over $500 million of debt that's been wiped out. So these programs are valuable. They give you education. They give you information.
You know, Dave doesn't do a live show. Because I've tried to call a few times. So what you do, you go to, you get to leave your question or comment on a tape that he listens to, and if they want to mix that in their program, they call you back for the interview. And then they tape it, and then they do it that way. So that's a little bit interesting. The shows that don't have any guests, there's, I call them talking head shows. No, I don't like those. I don't want to be preached at for an hour on some financial topic. I'd rather listen to people calling in. That's real talk radio.
Yeah, they might ask your question if you don't get on. Okay. Give me a couple of examples of really unusual questions you've gotten.
Well, I remember one lady called in and wanted to know if she could probate her own will. Now, you have to die before your will goes through probate, so it's impossible to do that yourself.
It's a good thing you were on radio because you might have had an interesting look on your face on television.
I think I've been asked so many questions, my expression doesn't change too much most of the time. So this lady, though, what made it even more interesting was she didn't quite understand, so I had to explain it about 3 times. And a lot of people will call me and not like the answer, so they'll try to rephrase it slightly, hoping for a different answer. But I usually come back with the same answer, and then sometimes they get a little frustrated. I had one man that called, and he was talking so slow, which is just not good for people listening to radio. I mean, he would talk, I don't even want to take the time to tell you how slow he was talking. But so I finally got him to tell me what the problem was, and he said, well, the funeral home director was giving him trouble because he couldn't get the gold from his mother's teeth from the funeral. And then, I didn't know, I was so taken back by the question, I kind of chuckled, and I said, well, and then in his very slow way of talking, he said that I was going to laugh at him like everyone else has with that question.
Oh.
So now I'm on live radio talking to this fellow who talks extremely slow, and now I've got to answer why, to tell him I wasn't laughing at him. I was just kind of pausing to think about how I was going to answer this question. But I have questions like a guy back in the 80s when the service stations used to check your oil. Some guy went into a service station and they bent his dipstick, and that was a question about...
Oh, I need a lawyer.
So I've had some crazy questions. It's been a lot of fun, though. And I don't, unlike most shows, I don't screen my calls. So I'll take almost any...
Take a chance, yeah.
Yeah, take any question. And the ones that are more entertaining and not so educational, but just entertaining.
Gotta mix it up.
That makes for fun radio. I mean, that's what talk radio is all about. It's just
what's the kind of the theme of the most popular question? Is it the trust? Is it the will?
Well, I think the most popular theme generally is estate planning, because that's my primary practice area. So if I'm in between calls or something that's interesting has happened in the world of estate planning, or maybe even something with my clients, I'll talk about that topic briefly. So I talk more about estate planning than I do other issues for the most part.
How come you chose that? When you went to law school, did you know what your niche would be?
No. My first couple of years of practice, I did everything. I did bankruptcy, I did family law, I did criminal law. I mean, I was 35 years old when I started practicing, and so I left a very good job as a general manager. I had a company car, perks, good salary. So when I decided to go out on my own, I would take any case, just to get my law practice going and to see what I like to do. And a financial planner that brought me, one of the people that had left where I worked became an assistant to a financial planner. And we kind of got back together after I had left, and she had said, my boss would really like to meet you. He does a lot of estate planning seminars. Would you be interested? So I went over and talked to them a little bit, and I started doing estate planning. I really liked it. I mean, I can sit in my office most of the day and help people, and not going to court and fighting with other attorneys and judges in the court system, and I can just spend my whole day helping people.
Would you ever want to be a judge?
No, I don't think so.
Really be interesting.
It would be, but I think I like what I do so much that I wouldn't want to change.
Okay, well, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
34 years in radio, and I'm sure a lot of people have been helped, and the only thing that cost them was telephone calls.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, in all your years, how has estate planning changed? Because I kind of remember a time when wasn't everything kind of in the husband's name? I remember when my mom started writing checks for the first time.
Well, I think if we were just talking about the period of time that I've done radio, I think during that time most husbands and wives would own things jointly, unless it was a second or third marriage or so forth, and they decided to keep separate assets.
Well,
And
has estate planning, because you have to stay on top of law, the way the laws change on this too. Have there been any major changes in planning your estate? Because it's one of the wisest things you could ever do. And let me remind you, we are offering these two items for this gift of $25. One, the larger one, you can write out everything that you own. They thought of everything, and it will really give you a picture of what you have, and probably you'll be kind of surprised. And the other estate planning handbook, as I mentioned at the top of the show, it is Florida, but it's going to give you the information, and you can find out if there are variances in your own state. But do laws ever change to the point that I got to notify my people?
well, we send our clients a letter every 3 or 4 years and suggest they come in and update documents. Durable power of attorney, healthcare, surrogate, and living will documents should really be updated about every 3 years, because financial planners and medical people don't accept those after a period of time. I would say
I probably need to make an appointment
yeah,
with you.
you do. So the major change along the way, I think, has been about estate taxes. Because when I started, the estate tax was like anything over $250,000 would be taxed. Now it's gone up from that to 600 to $1 million to $1.5 million, and today you can leave $11.4 million tax-free
And not be taxed.
and not be taxed.
Praise the Lord. Why they can't take the stuff we've earned.
And if you're a married couple, it's twice that. It's 11.4 each.
How in the world did that happen? Usually it's the opposite.
Well, 2010, 2009, the exemption was $3.5 million. 2010 it was unlimited. George Steinbrenner died owning the New York Yankees, a $1 billion baseball team, with no tax that year on his estate. The Congress had to do something in 2010, and in 2011 it went to from 3.5 to 5 million. And then over the last years, it accelerated to $11.4 million each.
So it's probably
So
not a whole lot of people have to worry about that.
Now, a lot of people think, well, gee, I don't have an estate tax, I don't need a trust. That's totally false. Because our minimum probate fee on any size estate is like $2,500. And if you do a trust, it's zero. It's zero probate dollars if you have everything in your trust. So people with $50,000, $100,000 will do a trust. I mean, it makes sense to me to avoid just the minimum fee is $2,500.
Well, we have Joe's website on the screen right now if you want to contact him. But the important thing to know is, even with a will, you might end up paying some stuff. The trust, you don't pay any tax. And trust,
well, no probate.
Yeah, and trust is it's very streamlined to handle. When someone passes away, it can be handled right away.
Yeah, well, just quickly, the disadvantage of wills are they go through probate. It takes a long time, becomes a public record, so it's no privacy.
All wills have to go through probate?
All wills, if you die with something just in your name. You see, if you die with a trust and everything is in the trust, there's no probate. It's private. It's quick and easy for the family to take care of. And,
a living will is what most of us have, right? We could change it.
A standard will, just a last will and testament. But 70% of people who do estate planning just do a will. If you own a home or some other assets just in your name, that's going to go through probate. Living trust is just a fancy will that avoids probate of any assets inside the trust.
Very, very important. How long have trusts been available? I know when I was a little kid, and this wasn't hardly ever a topic of conversation, but the only thing we heard about was a will.
Yeah, trusts go all the way back to the 1400s when the government used to own the land and give it to the farmers in trust. They've been around a long time. In the 1960s, I think trust became popular when a guy named Dacey from New York wrote a book on trust and avoiding probate. Back then, though, his book recommended individual trust almost for all your individual assets, so a person could have a whole bunch of trusts. Now you can put most all of your assets into one trust. So they've been around a long time. They've become more popular. I have a educational book from the American Bar Association, telling attorneys back in the 60s, do as many wills as you can, build up a will file. One day they'll have to go through probate, and that could be a big source of your revenues in your later years. The more wills you did, the more probate you would get. So then probably in the 70s and 80s, trusts became more and more popular, and people learned they didn't have to pay the big probate fees. They could avoid that with trust.
Isn't it true that probably most people have no idea how rich they are? Because they haven't put the pencil to it, and you know the value of your home.
You ask them,
and
they'll
this
say
and this.
not that much, and then you start asking them questions, and oh my gosh, I didn't know I had that much. When you start adding it up.
And of course, this is the form that will tell you that. That'll tell you exactly what you have. And as I remember Joe talking about one time, you said, okay, you got this, you got this, you got this, and before long it was pretty obvious that they had, some value. One thing I've appreciated about Joe, I think you attend the same church my daughter does, to leave a testimony. Boy, I agree 100%. Something written down in that will, in that trust.
Well, if most of our audience would go pick up their will and read it, it's just going to say, I, John Smith, being of sound mind, disposing memory, hereby making my last will and testament. But you can put a little personal testimony in there saying, and believing in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And then you could put whatever else you want to follow that as a testimony. And the last thing your children will read, most likely, that you signed was your will. And you have one last chance to make an impact on their lives. And you can put a testimony clause. That's a very tough time for families, but if they read that will, they'll give them more peace of mind, and you're having one last chance to give them a testimony.
That's so important, and it doesn't take much time. Think of what you want to say and get it in there. It will be what they remember.
Yeah, I have 2 or 3 standard versions of what you can put in there, but of course the person, I had one lady that wrote 3 pages of stuff that she wanted in there as her testimony.
She wanted to leave her testimony.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
good for her. You could leave nothing more important. You might have grandchildren that are not serving the Lord, and any death in the family is huge impact, huge. And that's an opportunity. It's really an opportunity to leave that testimony. And that moment when people are vulnerable to receive messages, your grandkids, great-grandkids, they, get a good picture of that testimony, it would have a lifetime advantage. Well, Joe, we're out of time, but again, I want to absolutely congratulate you.
Well, thank you.
34 years in the radio, and all the times you've come here, I know you've helped some of our viewers, and I really appreciate it, because here at Homekeepers, we want to help you every way we can, and that is the absolute truth, and I thank God for the good guests that He sends to us. So, join me next time, please, remembering there's no higher calling than that of a homekeeper. God bless you.
If you should miss a Homekeepers program, you can catch up by going to www.ctnonline.com. Click on CTN Programs and then on Homekeepers.